This is Season 1, Episode 6 of Mastering the RPG, a tabletop RPG podcast all about upping your game. The episode tonight, The Selfish Rogue, or I'm just playing my character. Welcome to Mastering the RPG. As I said, it's a tabletop RPG podcast focusing on maximizing your game. Doesn't matter if you're a game master, doesn't matter if you're a player. We got advice, ideas, cool stuff we find, and some pretty strong opinions. I'm Carl, and I'm here with my co-hosts Eric and James, and you can find information at masteringtherepg.com. That's one word. And if you have feedback, questions, or you want us to adjudicate arguments, we don't care. You can contact us at gamemaster@masteringtherepg.com. Again, both of those are one word. Hey guys, great to see you, hear from you again.
Hi Carl, how's it going?
Going fantastic. Fantastic. How about you, Eric? How you doing?
I am doing adequate. Slightly above adequate, we'll say.
Middling.
Yeah, well, yeah, a happy middling.
So kind
now
of,
that I'm here with you guys, it's better. So
kind of at a +1 on your D20. I'm kind of at a +3 on D20 sort of thing. And
yeah.
All right, there you go. All right, so hey, tonight we've got kind of our regular thing we have right now, the cool stuff found, and I'm going to take that one on myself.
Cool stuff.
We have cool stuff found. Do you copy? Cool stuff found. Over. All right, so what do I have tonight? Tonight I have a brand new book that just got released July 18th, 2022, called Slaying the Dragon, The Secret History of Dungeons & Dragons, and it's by a gentleman called Ben Riggs. And he is a self-proclaimed RPG historian. He's done a lot of research, talked to a lot of the key players. He also has a podcast called Plot Points, where he talks about role-playing games as a important societal and pop culture, not just games, but that they have an important impact on people. And in those podcasts, he also had some very long, detailed discussions with some of the folks who were in this book. So pretty cool. It's already #1 new release on the pop culture site, and it's early release. Wow. And I think 18th, 19th, 20th. You'll hear this a little later than that, but by then it'll probably still be doing very well. So what's this book about? It's a little bit different than just a generic history of Dungeons & Dragons, where it's like, well, here's how the game was created. Gary did this. Arneson did this. They argued. So this is what came out of the Minneapolis group and blah, blah, blah. It has some of that, but it also talks a lot about the business and the culture of TSR and its rise and its fall to the point where it was sold to Wizard of the Coast. And he's really done the research. I mean, he's talked to the key players from back in the TSR day. I mean, we're talking people like Peter Atkinson, Margaret Weiss, Monty Cook, Zeb Cook, Ed Greenwood, Jeff Grubb, and then a whole bunch of people from the business side of it. Development guys, managers. Never was able to talk to Lorraine. She declined comment apparently, but a lot of the key players there. And so it's a really good read. I've just got the book, and so I'm starting to read through it. That was kind of a joke we had, that I'm going to talk about a book I haven't read. So I went through it somewhat. I got into it, and it's fortunately I've heard Ben go through some early chapters at Gen Con, so he's done panels there. And so that's why I pre-ordered it, because it was pretty cool. So I'll give you an example of kind of what makes this book interesting and different. Around page 35, we've got the chapter TSR's Near-Death Experience. Now, this is in 1982. So remember, TSR kind of failed more in the 90s when they bought by Wizard of the Coast, but they had an early scare with kind of falling from a business standpoint. Remember when AD&D hit its heights and people all had the books, and so suddenly sales started dropping off. So let me read kind of an excerpt here. After years of stunning success, the company was about to fall, and hard, but you wouldn't know it from the coverage the company received in the mainstream press. In the winter of 1982, Inc. magazine proclaimed TSR of Lake Geneva, Wisconsin, the sixth fastest growing privately held company. Now, I'll skip ahead a little bit, but that was like little papers. This was, the big guys talking about giving them recognition, validation, all that sort of thing. So then the article, I'll continue. The article cooed over the company and its managers. Quote, business is a game to the managers of TSR, and they keep winning, unquote. That was wrote by Stuart Alsop II. The chief operating officer, Kevin Bloom, bragged that gamers were simply, quote, intuitively good businessmen, end quote. Gygax himself theorized Gygax theorized gaming taught the company's employees, quote, to analyze and cooperate, unquote. And they were such good businessmen that they, quote, never had a major failure, unquote. Anyway, it goes on from there. But this is the kind of
Interesting.
This is the kind of stuff that Ben talks about. I don't want to give away more of that, but that's the beginning of the chapter. So it really provides, and hearing him at Gen Con, it really provides a complete, utter insight into the rise and fall of this early game company beyond, there was like, and this is some of the stuff that I know from listening, there were like warehouses full of product that was never going to ship because of the deal they had with their publisher. They got paid the minute they made the thing versus the minute it sold. So they had warehouses full of stuff that's never going to sell because they were getting revenue from it. But at some point, they had to pull, the rug got pulled out. But you should read the book, Slaying the Dragon, A Secret History of Dungeons & Dragons by Ben Riggs. So what do you guys think of that?
Yeah, it sounds really interesting. Did they talk at all about like the creative process that they went through to actually come up with the ideas, like mechanically, or is it just kind of more on the business side?
When Ben's did his presentations at Gen Con, it wasn't so much the creative process as the company. Understanding the D&D history, the company, versus the creative process that went on. Though there are pieces in here, I would assume that he talks a little bit about the culture of TSR, because he does in some of his, where the creatives were sort of, they could go off, just dream big ideas, throw stuff against the wall, and a lot of the business managers weren't in their face saying, well, here's what the best product would be based on our demographics. Yeah. They got a lot of freedom to do what they wanted to do. But what's interesting, though, is they did not tell the creatives how much money they were making on different products.
Really?
So people who were making a product had no idea how well it was doing in the market. So when they come up with new ideas, they could tailor it around, people like this idea or people don't like this idea. And that's actually in a later part of the book, to be honest. So it's interesting.
You've piqued my interest now. Like, I wasn't think I'd be interested in it, but now I definitely want to give it a read or a listen.
I have read Game Wizards by John Peterson, which is kind of the tale of the formation of Dungeons and Dragons and the creation of Dungeons and Dragons and the feud between Gygax and Arneson and kind of all that stuff. This sounds like the next step to that evolution. It sounds like it's kind of the next move after that period.
Yeah, I think it's a great. They're very complementary, and Ben talks about how he really enjoyed that book as well. So I think reading both of them would probably be a good thing to do. We can't lose sight of our history. And this book goes up to when it was bought by Wizards of the Coast, sort of the rise and fall there. But it'd be great to have other books that talk about, because now we got the rise and fall of Wizards of the Coast, and they're purchased by Hasbro, and the creation process behind D&D 5e, and I bet that would be a cool story if somebody would have written that.
Yeah, that would be interesting. Yeah.
All right, so. Now it's time to get on with the main topic.
Mastering the RPG with Carl, Eric, and James. Yeah.
All right, we're doing the main topic, and who's going to run it this time? I think we're going to throw that over to Eric to lead us through.
Oh, yes.
Through this this jaunty discussion of the selfish rogue.
I feel like this, once people saw the title, everybody, anybody who's played games long enough had that kind of instinctive gut memory action of dealing with somebody like this. But yeah, I think let's start by defining what we actually mean when we say the selfish rogue. And more in a broader sense, because it's not just the one thing. So I define it as a player character who acts in their own self-interest to the detriment of the party, which can normally be fine and should happen in normal play at times. But the caveat there is, while not expecting or accepting any type of consequences from the party, GM, or the game world, role-playing, or, outside of the, real life type of thing. I think we see this a lot in video games, especially like our massive online games. Loot ninjas come to mind. Those are the people that would always rush ahead and steal everything, right? That's the kind of... But I think besides that kind of behavior of trying to get all the loot for themselves and not share it, I mean, we see evil characters in a good party can fall into this trap. Not always. We'll talk later about how that can be done correctly, but it can definitely fall in the trap that way. Yeah. Or like characters, if there's a setup of like a character's a captain or any type of position of power, and they kind of, spend their time role playing out like belittling or abusing the PCs, or if they're like a jailer versus jailees, and then that role gets switched around, and they, take that as personally when the people try to role play like, oh, we are upset with you because you did these things, and they take that, into real life. That's also kind of in this. How would you guys? Is that kind of what you guys think when you hear this, or you have a different take on it?
I think that's a good
Carl.
take. For me, it just comes down to they got the main character syndrome, right? The world revolves around them. They are the main character of everything, and their actions are all for themselves. For their betterment and enjoyment, and that enjoyment then takes away from other players' enjoyment. And if the other players don't react, they're taking away player agency from the other players because they have to just let this person, do what they need to do for the better, just to keep everybody getting along. But that's exactly what you said, Eric. But I'm the main character. Everything revolves around me. I can do what I want. I can steal what I want, and there's no consequence to me because we all have to play nice, but I'm not playing nice.
Yeah, James, did you throw anything else on top of that?
I think that hits the nail on the head. Yeah, it's a player that really takes the caveat of you've got the freedom to do whatever you want, and so it's kind of like, well, I will do whatever I want, and what I want to do is generally be an arsehole, which is a bit of a problem. It's that lone wolf playing in a group thing that just happens every now and then, and it's a real issue where their personal backstory, their personal story is ultimate and runs often counter to a goal of a group or the way that all the other players at the table want to be acting. Yeah.
But yeah, and like I think you can do that correctly, and that can be an interesting dynamic. I think where it goes beyond that is when they do that overtly and the players react negatively in character, and they use the excuse of, this is just my character, right? And this is what they would do. So why are you getting mad, or why? And it's like, well, we're not getting mad. Our characters are getting mad, and we'll talk about that more. So let's now move on to what are the main problems with this? Like, what does it do to the game? James, what do you see as the main kind of problems with this?
For me, there's a few of them. Broadly, there's issues about just socially interacting well with other players at the table. If we come to the game as a premise that we're here to have fun and we're here to have fun collectively and everyone's going to have a good time, kind of when you have that self-centered character that just wants to fulfill their own agendas, may very well undermine what the group's trying to do. It can be very frustrating to players at the table, just as much as it's frustrating to the characters at that table, because ultimately it can disrupt a game terribly. The group might be very much moving in a very big direction, and that one person will just kind of do an immediate U-turn or throw the spanner in that works for what the players are trying to achieve, which can be a real issue. And in terms of character, it often leaves both the DM and the other characters in the lurch, exposes them to danger within the story that they weren't expecting. There are, suddenly you're all getting booted out of town because all the guards are angry by that one guy that decided he was going to firebomb the tavern because that's what his character would do. There's issues narratively within the story, and then, as you say, it exposes the other characters to have to then react to this thing in a similar vein, which often just provokes all sides. So yeah, there's so many. I have so many problems with this one.
Yeah,
It's not funny.
yeah.
For me, I also believe that in a lot of ways it directly challenges the dungeon master. The dungeon master kind of lays out a story and kind of, here's the scenario. This is what we're doing. In a lot of ways, this behaviour is almost like a direct challenge to that. And ergo to the dungeon master. It's a bit of like yep, I understand what you're doing and what this story is. I don't really want to be part of that. So instead, I'm going to firebomb the tavern. Now what are you going to do? And of course, it derails all your preparation. You've got to suddenly think on the fly about, what the guards will do and whether they're going to arrest everybody. And then that escalates because then the player says, well, I'll defend myself and kill that guard. And now all of a sudden you've got the whole story just gets blown up. And it causes real problems for me.
Yeah.
Carl, any other things on top of that?
Well, I think just to kind of put a point on it, I mean, the whole point of the game is a collaborative storytelling, a collaboration between the players, the game master, and everyone to tell an interesting story. And when you have somebody who's sort of got that, I'm the main character, you're no longer collaborating on a story. You're no longer working together to do something. You've got the people now, not even the characters, the people not enjoying themselves and not having a chance to express their creativity. This person just kind of takes over. And I think that's, James, as you express it, right? Part of them trying to take over the story is I'm firebombing the tavern, not, recognizing that this is a collaborative, but I'm not going to be collaborative. I'm going to be a dick and an individual who wants to, just do my thing. So, and complain that it's my character that's making me do it, which we'll talk about that in a minute where that doesn't fly, but so
and that's definitely, I mean, like everything you guys said is totally spot on. And it really puts the onus like often on the party role playing wise to like pull up the slack, because I'm going to make the argument now that the whole excuse, well, we know it's ultimately selfish, like it doesn't make sense, and it doesn't hold any water at all, because these characters that are in an adventuring party, which is pretty mercenary, right? They're usually very mercenary how it's structured. That if they're a competent adventurer, and they would have to be if they're level 2, level 3, or whatever, seasoned in Savage Worlds, whatever it is, they would know how to work well with others. If they're in a group, they would know how to work with others. So even if you're a complete scoundrel, asshole, evil person, you're not going to alienate the people that are, either has your back fighting or that you're making money with, that you have this shared interest together, right? You're not going to alienate them. So ultimately, the excuse just on its own doesn't even hold any water anyways, because it's just, I would make the argument to the person, no, your character wouldn't do that because, they've been living in this world, they've been operating, they would know that you can't just steal from your allies or your coworkers all the time and expect them to work with you.
I'll throw
and that's
even
what they
more,
ultimately expect them to work
fuel
with
on the
you.
fire.
So, yeah.
This is all not real, people. You made this character, right? So
yeah, of course.
What my character would do, I mean, you're not allowed to say I was just following orders because you made this character. They're fake. You did it. Monsters don't exist. It's all made up. So if you can't make up a character that fits the model like you're saying, Eric, which is you want to be with these people and you want to collaborate with them and you want to, make money and save the kingdom or whatever, then you should be doing a character like that, because that's what's required. I don't even understand it. It's this whole, my character does that. Well, you made the character. Hello.
But yeah, exactly. Of course. It's like, that's not an excuse. You made the choices to make it. But like, what I keep bringing up, and we'll talk about this at the end, is that like Savage Worlds has flaws, right? I mean, it has hindrances that are often can be, I'm a kleptomaniac or a pyromaniac, right? That can be a thing. But there's still, while, somebody who's playing it properly, I guess we'll save this for the end. I'll cut myself off here. So let's move on to how do we deal with this? And we'll start with how do we deal with these kind of players as game masters? Or did you want to maybe give any examples first? I think we all have maybe a burning example in our hearts and soul. So let's start with you, James. I know, what's your top burning example of this?
Examples.
That's a hole in your soul. But let's do the top one for you.
We have many examples, and look, in some ways, my example's a little bit different in that it's not the backstabbing of the group, and it's not burning down the tavern, and it's not telling the king to go and stuff himself and to kind of sabotage the story.
Yeah.
But I have a similar kind of problem in a lot of in this, and this is where I actually ended up in an argument with its argument, and it was a full blown argument with a player of this was what my character would do, and it went over 2 game sessions, which was It was getting ridiculous. I was playing Call of Cthulhu with a group of adventurers, and the premise of the story is they were chasing some evil cultists into their safe house. So the whole group, there's a big chase sequence. The driver of the car, who we will call Emilio, was going to be the last one out of the car. So everyone else ran into the building after these cultists, and one by one, I had to explain that they were being transported to another dimension. So effectively, the building was a front. As they walk through the door, they get transported to another dimension. The other players bought into it. That's cool. We're still chasing the cultists. I don't know that. I don't know that the guy that opened the door in front of me has gone to another dimension. I disappear. Player 2, I disappear. Player 3, I disappear. Player 4, I disappear. Player 5 is Emilio, who parks the car and casually walks up to the door and says, "Guys, are you okay in there?" And gets no answer and chooses not to go in the door. I'm like, "Are you going to follow the guy?" I went, "Nope." I said, "Why?" "Well, something just feels off about this, and I don't think my character would do that." So I go, "Okay, all right. So what does Emilio do instead?" "Well, I sit in the car and I wait." "Okay, you sit in the car and you wait." "Excellent. I'll cut to the other guys." And so I cut to the other guys and I talked through what they experienced when they came out the other side of the dimension. 45 minutes later, "Emilio, what are you doing?" "Well, I might wander and look at a newspaper." "Okay." And I role-played with him a bit about wandering a newspaper. And then I talked about what he had for dinner. And then going home and feeding his cat. And getting up in the morning and going to a cafe for breakfast and reading a novel. And I was just, "Dude, and session 2 turns up. And are you going to investigate what's going on with this group?" And interspersed with the group having awesome adventures. They're killing cultists and they're having a great time. And we go back to Emilio. "What are you up to?" "Well, today I think I think my character needs a new pair of shoes. So I'm going to go." And I'm just like, what the hell, dude?
What was in his head?
It was just absurd. He was just like, "Well, this is what my character was doing. He's a bit of a coward. He's a bit risk adverse." And I'm like, "Sure, but you haven't heard from any one of your friends in 2 days now.
Yeah.
Are you calling the police?" "Nope." "Why?" "Well, I just don't think..." And so eventually, I mean, of course, we'll talk about what happens with the solution. But this was the most absurd what my character could do, because he literally kind of backed himself into a corner where he was actively not playing a game. And it was just the strangest behaviour I've ever seen. But
That
for me,
sounds
it's
bizarre.
an extreme version of, I don't really want to play what you're playing. I want to play something entirely different. And I therefore want you to create something different for me. And in this instance, I just went, "Nope." The rest of the world is very boring. But that's my extreme version of that's what my character
That
would
is
do.
extremely bizarre, and that's a different twist. And I want to a quick example of something that happened to me. That's also a twist on this, where it's not always this is what my character would do, but kind of in the same vein as what we're talking about. I was a player in a game. It was set up to be that we would be in prison, and then we'd be kind of breaking out. And one of the players was, I guess, talked with the GM and decided that he would be a jailer, but that would eventually, the GM would work it out where they would join our group, right? And so we started the game, and he started playing as one of the jailers, but not being a sympathetic jailer of kind of not giving us anything to work with, taking my hat away, like being a jerk to us the whole time. And then, when the situation flipped, where we were all free and he was with us, and we were like, "Well, we're gonna put like handcuffs on you," and he was like, "No," and it's like, "We'll just put handcuffs on you for now, and then we'll decide later, what we're gonna do. Like, we'll talk to you later." Kind of, we're role playing it out, right? We're role playing what our characters would actually do after we've been abused by this guy, a bunch of times. We wouldn't just instantly be like, "Oh, welcome to the group, and let's all have a powwow and give each other back massages." You know what I mean? We'd be mistrustful of this person, rightly so. But we're still trying to be like, obviously being like, "Well, just for this small amount of time, you might be inconvenienced, but then we'll work it out." And he was just like, completely no. And it actually went down to us fighting each other. We actually got into a fight. And then the fight was so much, and then he was getting killed, and I was healing him, and he decided, well, I'm just going to try to kill this person's character. Like, he was not doing anything else besides trying to just kill me before he died at this point.
Session
so it was a complete...
Awesome.
Exactly. It was a complete... So, again, it's not like I'm playing my character this way, but, like, he made decisions about, role-playing, and then when we properly responded to those, even when being obvious that we weren't just going to keep him in this way, he couldn't handle it and became like hurt himself or for whatever issues that brought up for this person, that they didn't leave us an out besides, one of the other player characters being like, well, then I'm just attacking you because we're not going to give in here, right? Like, we're not going to just give in. So again, that's what I mean when I talk about, like, not expecting any type of consequences from what you do.
And in a similar vein of escalation, where suddenly everyone has to be in like this. In Emilio's, I just had to kind of continue to escalate this issue. There wasn't there's no release valve here where there's an acquiescence to say, all right, okay, we'll get on with the story now. It's like we're going to dig in forever for some random weird reason. It's kind of, which I still don't understand. It's like, yep. How about you?
For whatever
Carl?
reason. So yeah, we've encountered, we said these problem players. Let's talk about how to deal with it as a game master.
I'm sure Carl's got his nightmare.
Oh, sorry, Carl. Do you have a burning one you want to?
You got to give
Carl his. I've
right.
definitely had in modern games people who've decided to I'm a sniper and everyone goes into the building. And I'm just I'll keep Overwatch. Well, they're in the building. I'll keep Overwatch.
Yep.
Okay, so you just stay there, and then the shit hits the fan, and it's like, well, I'm gonna go and help them out. Well, you realize you're like 500 yards away.
10 minutes away.
5 miles away, yeah.
You're gonna be there in 10 rounds. Okay. I'm gonna keep going. But of course, I've had the same. We didn't mention that, but the classic rogue who runs everywhere and gets in trouble constantly in the dungeon. Now, I make the mistake of running Dragonlance back in the day, and so these were by definition Kender characters who take the Kender's a great thing, halfling, whatever, but they took that character to the extreme. And, even in the books, right, he doesn't completely derail everything everybody's trying to do, but they took it to the extreme and, basically Kender steal everything, walk down every hallway, do the Leroy Jenkins, and then go, who, me? Little me? Oh, I'm sorry.
There's a changeling the dreaming archetype called a puka, which is similar, where they can't tell the truth. Their default setting is a lie, which is okay because you can kind of role play that you're effectively saying the opposite of what you mean when you're playing. But players that play that character, it's Kender syndrome. Causing chaos just because they can. Yep.
Yeah. All right. Well, we definitely established now a wide variety of personal nightmares and in general. So let's talk about, as a game master, what are the best ways that you deal with this? Carl, let's start with you again. What do you have any tips and tricks here?
Well, so the most important one is there has to be. I'll go back to that adult conversation, a true conversation with the player. Let them understand what's going on. Let's assume that they're reasonable and they really just think that this is what their character should be. It sounds like in some cases that's not the case, but that's the place to start, right? It's, hey, you're disrupting, you're taking the other player's agency away. They have to attack you because they're forced to, and let's just play it out and just like. You can have flaws, and that's great, but reel it back a little bit. The second thing, of course, is just let the consequences be what they be, right? And when that character dies, now you roll up a new character, and let's roll up a character that is not what your character does.
I am the brother seeking revenge for my guard friend that was ruthlessly killed by a bunch of prisoners. Yeah, right.
James,
that's from just that's the broad brush. You guys, what are some specific ones that you think you guys might employ?
Look, there's a couple of things. There's a couple of techniques that I employ, but there's also a couple of early warning signals or red flags that hopefully, as a games master, when you're dealing with it, it presents itself pretty quickly. For me, there's two things really. The first one is it's called the social contract, for role playing. And there's a fantastic YouTuber called Seth Skorkowski. He's an Emmy winning YouTuber who deals with Call of Cthulhu mainly, but also a bit of Dungeons and Dragons and a bit of Traveller as well. He talks a lot about the social contract of role playing, where the dungeon master, there's some contractual, it's not really a contract, but some contractual obligations to create a world that's accepting to the players and to, kind of be flexible and not railroady and things like that. And the social contract for players is really an acceptance that you will play within the confines of the world that's being presented to you and be a willing participant in the adventure that's presented to you, so that you don't come at a game where your initial reaction is to buck whatever the flow of that game is, and that you kind of align yourself with what you're going. And I thoroughly recommend anyone who is dealing with some of these issues to check out Seth's kind of take on this stuff. A lot of it is entirely about what Eric was talking about before. This is about a shared interest. This is about trying to establish a group's shared interest so that whatever you're doing is broadly aligned with the way the group's going. It allows for a couple of things then. If you want to be particularly villainous, it means that the villainy and the betrayal can be bigger and more kind of extraordinary as the story unfolds, rather than just nitpicking, bucking against the group over minor things as you travel. I think that's where the annoyance comes. A lot of how you deal with that shared interest is, of course, your session zero, where you sit down with all the players beforehand and present, this is the world, this is the theme, this is the idea of the group. And I'm finding more and more, as I'm bringing in new groups and kind of encouraging new people to play, setting up those boundaries to say, this is kind of what the group's agenda is going to be. Therefore, can please create a character that might fit that agenda. Yeah. So at least you're working in the same direction. And so then when you start to get characters in, there's some red flags. A really overblown black backstory that has lots of vengeance motifs, where you've been hard done by and you're really seeking to a kind of a lone wolf style kind of Northman revenge story where it's all about vengeance and nothing about connection, and these disruptive elements. It's a Dungeons and Dragons thing, but I have a natural kind of reluctance to bring in but I'm chaotic neutral. I just do what I want to do and I just like chaos. I'm a little trickster kind of thing. Yeah, but how do you continue to move that story forward? So just looking at that first initial conversations when they're making a character is kind of the big trigger point for me.
Yeah, session zero is a big one. I'm glad you brought that up. And when I got Eric into my group originally for a cyberpunk game, that was one of the things in my description of the game. You guys all have to figure out why you're working together and are friends, ultimately, and not at each other. Sorry, Eric, I cut you off there for a second.
It's good. No, you guys are totally right. And and as a GM, obviously, setting it up in the narrative, like you were saying, James, there's a reason why these people are together. I mean, make it compelling. I've been in games before where, and it's not not really the GM's part. I think it's a little bit of both, where the GM didn't do it. Was he kind of left it where the player characters really had no reason to stay together, and then but I was still obviously as a player trying to come up with reasons that we would, or whatever. I was trying to help the GM out, right? And some of the other players weren't doing that, but it was a little bit on the GM side there, because it was really like, well, we just have no reason to stay together at this point. You can't just always expect. You have to give them something, right? You have to give them something. Right. So that's really important. And I know, well, Carl, like you said, of course, proper communication. I think we will talk about that for most things, right? And I think that gets left at the wayside a lot. People don't want to have these real kind of uncomfortable talks, but ultimately, it's always going to be better. I think. Before going with proper communication, I think before you kind of take somebody aside, first in game as a GM, have those consequences first and see how they react. Because like I said, there can be flawed characters that can do this properly. And if they respond to those consequences by saying, well, this shouldn't be happening, then this is when the time to take them apart. If they play off of you with those consequences and maybe shift their character a bit, then you can say, okay, they've shifted, right? So I think it's good to maybe start with that, and then also be very clear as a GM that there's going to be consequences for certain things, be like, well, this is, foreshadow things. If somebody's going to do something, foreshadow them, like make it clear, and you could do it in character, in game, whatever, that there is going to be consequences. So it's not just an overt, like hard, well, I'm coming down on you right away for this, like, because it's not, people can change, right, and people will be adjusted. You don't want to go take somebody to the side.
Yeah,
first,
and I
so
think that's
how I see it.
the assumption is, so there's two kinds of these players, right, that we were talking about. There's folks that are habitual, and that's just how they are. And then, like
Yeah.
you said, Eric, there's people who just don't recognize that they're maybe going a little too far afield. And you hint that, well, this could happen if that's happening, or the other players are role playing that they're getting, and that person then reels it in and says, oh, I'm overplaying this. And you don't need to have those conversations and say, dude, you're just not getting it. They're getting it in game. They're saying, oh, my character's growing through my understanding with the other players and what they're doing. So I think you hit it on the head for those. The habitual guy, you got to hit him with a frying pan a little bit sometimes. So
Yeah, and then take it outside of the actual in game,
and that's the
people need
chat
that.
outside the game.
Yeah.
And are they a good fit for the group at that point? If you've got a
Yeah.
habitual kind of issue, then that's a bit of it. I really take your point on providing a warning. I find that I give it's almost like a metagaming warning in some way, saying, well, you are aware, of course, that the rules of this land mean if you go down this path, then some of the penalties could be capital punishment. Like that, the realm's not going to look kindly on this. So you sure you want to go down this path? Is kind of, I would offer that to a player just to give them an out. So that if they are committing to it too much, you can kind of say, well, there are consequences to this. Here's your opportunity for a take back. Before we go down this path.
Go to the point of no return.
I mean, your character knows that this is a bad thing. So you're just reinforcing that and saying, hey, you do know that your character knows that this is how things are going to go down, right?
Yeah.
So for sure.
Cool. So let's
the other side, the other one though, which is harder to deal with, and I find I have to jump in and directly adjudicate this all the time, is the whole, I've got good sleight of hand, I'm just going to steal that object back, or I want that thing, so I'm going to take it off another player. And that causes all sorts of dramas in my mind. And look, to be fair, again, I'm running kids' games, so there's always a rogue in the kids' game that someone else got the magic sword. It's like, well, I like that sword, I'm going to take that sword. Well, that's a whole other issue, because if you do successfully take that sword, then the other guy says, well, you've got my sword, I want it back, and then it just causes this, it's a horrible childlike thing. But I don't think it's limited to children. I've seen it so many times with adults, and it's like, oh, I want that thing, I'm just going to steal that thing, thinking there's no consequence, and it invariably blows a group up. So in those instances, I go, yeah, no, we're not going down that path today, guys. You're not stealing from each other, we're just not doing it. And for me, that's what my dungeon master would do. I just don't want to play a game where people are stealing from each other, and that's where we'll leave it. But that seems very, very heavy-handed, but in some ways I find it's the only way to get out of these situations sometimes.
If you want a game,
ruling, we're not doing this.
If you want a game where you're messing with each other, then you probably should be playing Vampire, right? If that's
yeah, that's true.
I mean, but like I think it's you have to know the game and the type of players that are in it. If you're in a good, like, I feel like, James, in our group in Fey Touched, like, we could have a scene where one of the players does steal something from another player, but because, like, all of us understand, we're telling, it's a story, we're accepting the consequences, it's like, it's a character growth moment. We're not doing it over the time. I think in that instance, like, you could do it right, and we'll talk about that at the end, more how you do it right. But I think there is a caveat there of, if you're at the level where you know the other players, you know that they can work, play off of this, because it can be an interesting thing, something like that. It can be interesting. It's just, often it's not, right? Often it's fraught, and it's not an in-character thing, and people don't want to accept those role-playing consequences. Very cool. So now let's flip the coin here and talk about as a player, which obviously not as much as a GM, but there's still things that you can kind of, how do you act as a player when somebody else is doing this? So what do you think, James? How would you act as a player? How do you,
Oh, again, well, there's 3 bits for me. Sorry, I always have mini lists for all my answers. I think about these things a lot. Again, we go back to the social contract. As a player, the social contract is, I'm going to have fun. But I expand that a bit and think, well, not only am I going to have fun, but I want to make sure that every other player is having fun. And I don't believe that's actually the role of the Dungeon Master. I think as a player, you need to be aware of if people are having fun and having a good time, and particularly if they're not. So if things that I do cause people to not be seeming to be enjoying the game, for me, that's a trigger. But then there's a trigger for change my behaviour. So this is how you get out of it. But if for someone else that is doing it and you're aware that someone's doing it, I often insert myself as that first kind of conciliation stopgap. If someone else is doing this as my character, I'll go, oh man, is everything all right? You sure? So you seem to be a bit tense in the shoulders. Everything, I just want to make sure you're cool because you're not really acting cool, man. And just kind of as a character insert as a conciliator. Because then if again, there's another player at the table offering an olive leaf, an olive branch, and the selfish rogue is not taking that olive branch, well, it's kind of just confirming that you're just being a dick. You know what I mean? It's kind of that if you can offer that support a bit, as opposed to doing the full, I'm going to double down on consequence. I'm going to over role play I'm the paladin and I'm furious and now I punch you. I'm just going, I'm the paladin and I care for you, man. Is everything all right? This seems out of character for you, and try and offer again that release valve. And often I'll lean right into the story with that to try and drag. I get that. Watching your father die and your mother and all your brothers and your 4 sisters and your mother-in-law and then your children and your best friend all slaughtered by the same guy. It must have been hard on you, but thankfully we're friends and we can get. You try and do that stuff to try and lean in. Yep. That's what I try and do, but I'm not sure if it works all
Carl?
the time, I'm going to say.
Well, I think I just to kind of, you're like really talking about, classic psychology, right? If you come at somebody hard, they dig their heels in and they become defensive. You're coming at them, I'm a friend. I'm here to help. What can I do to help you be a better person or, be a better character? And I'm saying it in a way that's not confrontational because then they won't. And that, again, is somebody who's not habitual and who just wants to be that way. That's a great idea. When I play characters and you can see it, it's like, I got my thing and that's my thing. And if you're like getting in my way, you're going to have the consequences. We're going to have words, and that's just what in character we're going to have words, never player, because it's always like, I don't care. I'll create a new character. I really don't. If that's that important to you,
of course.
But it's fine. But in character, we are going to have words, and hopefully we can role play those words out and come to an agreement. The whole we all battle each other, and at the end we all have a beer together, and you say, we're friends again because we got it out of our system.
Yeah.
And then
I think James. Oh, sorry. Go on.
Well, I was going to say, and the hard part is the metagaming, though, right? The rogue who steals stuff and takes your sword.
Yeah.
And I shoved it in my backpack. You don't even know I have. He doesn't even know I stole his sword. He thought it was someone else. I don't even know how to handle that. That's completely on the game master's purview. I'm not going to go. Well, I'm going to dig through his backpack. Because that happens all the time too, right? Another player goes,
yeah, definitely.
Well, I think he stole something. I'm going to run through. Why would you do that? Well, that's what my character would do. No. Now everybody's character is doing stuff that their character wouldn't do. But
so for me, that theft from a player is PvP. That's player versus player. That's just as much as if you just decide to fight each other, because it is pitting one set of skills against another. And I try and I'll put it out in notes before
You'll squash
a game,
it. Yeah, but GMs don't always squash it, though. That's the thing. So as a player, you guys both made excellent points. I think first, on top of you, James, yes, I think the first time as a player, when you're in these situations, the first thing to go is always kind of that yes and, right? Like be invested. Don't let them just do it. Like still react. Like you said, don't take such a hard stance at first. And then if they persist, then I think you can take a little bit of a harder stance. Not like I'm going to punch you in the face, but like, you talk to them later, be like, we might have to leave you behind, man. Like you're really causing a lot of issues. I don't want to do this. Like we want to help you. Like make, again, like the GM that we talked about before, make it known, right? Like be obvious that there is consequences, that they have no reason, because they're playing their characters. You're also playing your character, and your character as a competent adventurer in a group would not keep somebody around that's becoming a hassle for them over and over and over again, right? Like they just wouldn't do that. So you can go right back to them and be like, this is how my character is. And then in the case of, like you said, Carl, that is a very, very good point. And it's not always them stealing your item. The loot ninja, often what I've seen is the rogue. When we talked about this in the last thing with familiars, right? The rogue is kind of similar to the familiars often, where they're scouting ahead. They encounter a pile of treasure. They take all the treasure, They come back and people say, oh, did you find anything? And they say no. And the person's like, I'm going to do an insight check, and then, or they're like, I don't trust them because they were obviously, that's metagaming, right? Because they would have no idea that the rogue stole this. Maybe the GM can be like, later on, be like, we'll make a stealth check. And, oh, you guys like hear the clanging of coin or something. Like they can kind of give those hints. So that's a very good, like, yeah, Carl, one thing to do not as a player is to fall into that trap of metagaming. Because at that point, that's when you then talk to the GM separately and be like, I'm having an issue with them, that they did this and they do this again, even though my character doesn't know, me as a player is having an issue. And that's perfectly fine. Like, that's when you as a player, instead of metagaming it in character, talk to the GM aside, because it is an issue.
Yeah.
Right? Because it is hard, because metagaming is hard, and we're probably going to have a whole episode about metagaming, because it's one of those things where, even if you don't want to metagame, it's just inevitable that it happens on some level. We can't get around it because we're not playing, a computer game where we're locked out from each other, right? We're all hearing it at the same time. So
the jury cannot disregard that question, no matter how much they want to say it. The jury is not going to disregard the question.
Exactly. So with that rogue stealing stuff, maybe your character wouldn't know, but maybe your character would have an idea to know. We don't actually know because you heard it. It kind of puts it all into question. So that's when you kind of talk to the GM aside. Any other?
But I'm not
suggestions
averse to talking to the player aside either, and particularly adult games. Like, I'm an adult. I'm a grey-haired, wizened old man. It's not beyond me to kind of touch base with a player in between sessions, I'm not sure what was going on between us in this game. It wasn't much fun. If there was something I did, I apologise. And, I'm conciliatory outside of the game to try and resolve it. And, of course, if all else fails, I'll chat with the DM. I'm trying my best. Things aren't working here. In
a leadership, in classic leadership, and this is kind of business, there's the I statement, which it's like, when I see this, I feel, you're not saying you're wrong, it's like, I feel that this is the thing, and what I would like to see is X. And so it's a way of couching that in a way that's not confrontational. It's not like, you're wrong. It's like, I feel that my treasure's being stolen, and I'd really like to have some of that treasure, and can we play that way? So anyway, may work, may not, but human psychology in a game is no different than human psychology anywhere else, I think.
No, it's just a micro universe of it.
Back to the session zero, kind of make sure that that's all being set up well. But we don't steal from each other. We steal from others and we share. It's kind of it's pretty.
We kick in the door, we loot, and we kill. That's what we do. That's our job.
Sure.
I want to bounce off that for just a second, James. Where I do think, if you think there's a personal thing between two players, I'm also I'm always the one that I'll talk to that person or talk to me. Like, if I'm doing something, I prefer you talk to me if you think it's personal.
Yeah, of course.
But I do think generally it's better to talk to the GM. I think, at least in my experience, when players hear something from another player, it's not the same as hearing it from a GM. I think that people get more defensive when it's another player, even though the GM is not really I guess the GM is in a place of authority, right? Is the authority figure in this, when we're in this realm. Not always, it depends, but generally they are kind of, so I think it is easier for them to, it's like when you're if you're in a store, right? And you see a customer doing something bad and you'd be like, what, you shouldn't do that, or that's not good to do. They're going to take that a lot harder from you than if you told an employee and that employee said something to them, right? It's just a different, people just react to those things differently. So I think if you have a personal thing, but I think generally, you're safer to go, that's just my opinion, you're safer to go to the GM.
Always the last resort for me. Yeah.
Okay.
But
all right.
That's just me. A different thing. A different way to play.
All right. Cool. And now in the very end of this, let's talk about how you can play as maybe a selfish character or as an evil character. So I'm going to start just with this one. Because I think first, playing characters with a major flaw is actually can be a good thing. It can be very rewarding, as long as you're flexible with. Again, this flaw is, flaws aren't always there. You shouldn't overuse your flaws because people are adaptable. People will react differently in certain situations. That's just how we are, right? We're not the same when we talk to our grandparents as we are how we talk to our friends, right? We are adaptable. We have to be. Social creatures have to be adaptable. So, somebody who has this flaw is not going to just overdo it with somebody they're relying on, like we talked about it before. So, pick and choose when you do it, and don't always trigger them. Even in Savage Worlds, if you have Bloodthirsty, right, where you kill people if somebody's not around, that's not always going to trigger, and you shouldn't always trigger it. You shouldn't always be murdering somebody because you took them prisoner, right? Like, it's something that you want to select the right moments for, the right narrative beats for. So to pick and choose. Evil people, like an evil person who's has an agenda that's hidden, right? They are not, the rule with that is you never are evil to other players. Like, if this is a lawful evil or just a smart evil, like an evil wizard that's smart, right? They're not going to ever be evil to players. They'll be evil to other people. When the players aren't around, they'll be evil to other people, but kind of hide it in a way when other players are around, but they will never be directly evil to the players because they are pawns in their scheme, right? They're using them as a resource. That's how they look at things. So I think we get hung up often on alignments and things like 5e. And like I said, alignments are mostly BS, right? I look at alignments as sometimes my character is chaotic good, sometimes they're neutral good, sometimes they're chaotic neutral, right? Depending on the situation. So be flexible with that. And then again, it's always good to, like, if you want to have a scene where you maybe steal something or your character has a really big issue with another character, I think it's a good thing to maybe talk to that person aside and be like, this is something that I kind of want to do. Like, are you cool with that? Like, my character, there's not something that I'm going to do permanently, but I kind of see my character having this issue, or that, they whatever the sword that you found, like, they were just completely adoring it. Like, do you want to do a scene where I kind of take it and you react to that? Like, I think it's perfectly fine to have those kind of things, but you should always clear it with the other player first if it's appropriate. Yes. So those are my main points. James, do you have any other kind of points that you would go?
I love evil. Look, evil. The temptation of evil, and the temptation of the individual power as it grows, particularly in Dungeons and Dragons, but it can happen in Call of Cthulhu. Call of Cthulhu is dealt with a little bit different because you have sanity that runs out. But the temptation of evil being presented with power or some kind of advancement to the detriment of everyone else around you is a theme that I love using, and I use it in almost all of my games as a dungeon master. That, I will tempt the warlock, I'll attempt the hexblood, I will tempt the kind of the rogue with here is the dubious morality decision, and are we walking down this path of evil? It will be to the Isildur destroying the One Ring. No, actually I won't. I'll keep it. That kind of grand evil turning gesture. But there's a couple of things that I always make sure that it's well appreciated. When you become purely evil, self-centered evil, you're a non-player character. At that point, it's like, forget it. You're not playing this guy anymore. So the last confrontation between the evil guy and the rest of the player group, the player's not playing that guy. Like, I'll take it as an NPC. You might be playing a hireling or another friend or the father or whatever, but you won't be playing the grand PvP against the group.
Yeah.
So for me, that's the big caveat that I'll try and explain to people. But I do love watching players delving into the evil side of things. Curse of Strahd's a fantastic game for that. In Curse of Strahd in 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons, you are tempted by the evil spirits of Amber, and they give you a dark gift. But with that dark gift comes evil tendencies. And I watched my last group that went through Curse of Strahd. 3 out of the 5 players went, I'm up for that. And we had to role play what the other 2 would feel like. Watching their friends be tempted by darkness after they've gone for so long fighting against darkness. The other way that I use is off-screen evil. So if you are playing an evil character, not the full I'm going to betray the whole group and be the big chaos force, is role-playing again, this is metagaming a little bit, but having the betrayal happen away from the eyes of the other players and away from repercussions from the other players. And so a lot of that's a discussion between the player and the dungeon master, not necessarily role played out. So you come back to the tavern and find that the tavern keeper and their family's been murdered. And as the storyteller, I know that it's actually one of the players. We've spoken that that's what they're going to do. But we're building the mystery narratively. We're not kind of doing it overtly in front of everyone, almost to rub their faces. It becomes part of the game, becomes part of that story. But, treat it with absolute caution is the general rule. And don't overdo it. Being the bad guy all the time is very, very tiring for every other player. It's kind of my thoughts, but that's how I generally run selfish and evil characters. I must admit, I don't think I've ever played one. It's just not my vibe. I like being the good guy. It's far more fun. But that's just me. Carl, how about you?
Well, I think I don't generally play bad guys, but so let me I guess reframe it in the sense of that black and white that Eric was talking about. It's like I'm this or I'm that, and the that is I'm always causing problems, I'm always stealing, I'm always whatever. But
Yeah.
People have goals, right? Your character has a goal, and whether you're an evil person or not, that goal is to do something, and every decision you make generally moves towards that goal. And if the decision, let's say I like to play shooters, right? And I like to play guys who would rather shoot you than look at you. But if every situation is I shoot my gun, I'm not getting to my goal. And me shooting my gun when I shouldn't be shooting, it's going to cause players problems. They go, why are you shooting your gun at the cops? This is crazy. Well, I'm not going to do that because every decision I make has to get me towards my goal. Evil player, the exact same thing, right? You're not going to kill every puppy you come up to or every kitten you come up to because you want the person who owns the kitten to think you're a nice person and bring you in so you can have something to eat, and that gets you to the next stage. You just got to think those decisions, and I think in fantasy and, we're playing a game where we get to be someone else. The someone else isn't always doing the bad thing just for the sake of doing the bad thing. You got a goal, right? And that should be part of that session zero discussion. What motivates your player character? Where are they going? What do they want? And if killing the barkeep off screen gets them closer to the goal, great. If it's just because I want to kill the barkeep, maybe not so much, right? So that's how I look at it. Nothing's black and white. Everything I do moves towards the goal. And if I do make some mistake and I shoot up something I shouldn't, and it's because it's thematically, like you said, Eric, the right thing to do, there'll be consequences, right? In Savage Worlds, I get a
But
penny.
roll with the consequences.
And we role play it out. And we're doing it in good faith. That's the other side of it, right? We're all role playing in good faith. Yeah. We all want to have the same story and have enjoyment. We're not a bad faith actor, which the sneaky rogue and the guy who wants to play his character is ultimately trying to do.
So do you think there is a place for the chaotic evil as a player character? Because chaotic evil won't think of consequences, like whatever I feel like doing at the time. I'm chaotic. It's all about chaos. I'm just going to exert murder, and I'm the Joker. You know what I mean? I'm just going to it's nonsense. I mean, can that be done as a player?
I don't think so, but that's why I think alignments are BS. Like, and most games have gotten rid of alignments because of that. Like, 5e's kind of held on to it like ghoulishly.
Well, it's a description, but think of that premise. Think of the Joker character, the psychopath that doesn't have the...
No, because they would never be in the group to the first place. Like, they can't just be that. You can't just be that one-dimensional. I think people go to chaotic neutral and go to chaotic evil and play them very one-dimensionally. I think, again, you can do it. You can have a chaotic evil side to you where you are, you just want to kill people sometimes because you're a psychopath and you love murder. But, psychopaths are still not just going to do it where they just, the ones that are bad at doing that will end up in jail or get killed. So for your character to be where they are, they have to be more than just chaotic evil. They have to be more than just completely acting on their own urges at all times, because then they wouldn't be in the party, as it were. They wouldn't be in whatever army, whatever it is, right? So I think it's just a very one-dimensional look at it. I think you can play as part of your character, but it can't be your whole character because it doesn't function, right?
That's why everybody should. That's why everybody should play true neutral. That's the right place to be.
So we have a little bit more time. I want to just throw this in there just real quick. So it's not quite in the selfish part, but playing an evil game, running an evil game. Sorry.
Yes.
Let's talk a little bit about that. So I played in a couple evil games. I think the best way as a GM, the most important thing is have a overwhelming existential threat that just constantly can keep them in line. That is the most important thing. Have something that is
the boss with the Suicide Squad.
Inevitable. Inevitable. There's a bomb in your head. One of my favorite game settings of all time is Savage Worlds, Necessary Evil, which is a superhero game where aliens have invaded Earth, have killed off all the heroes, and only the supervillains are left, and you guys are the ones fighting, trying to free the Earth because they're trying to kill everybody. And it's so fun to play as a supervillain, which again doesn't have to be completely evil, which is kind of, but to have that that thing keeping you in line of there's a bigger, badder guy who's our commander, and we're trying to fight these aliens. So that's my one tip. I haven't had a lot of experience with it, but I think that is the most important thing. James, do you have you ever done an evil game? Or?
Yeah, I've done evil games. They can be really fun. The marauding horde of orcs and goblins and bugbears that kind of descend upon a village because they've got something very specific that they've got to achieve. I think writing one, you've got to have a goal that isn't just mayhem and murder and destruction. That's the first one.
Yeah.
The second one is, and it sounds a bit counterintuitive, but that's actually where I put in my lines and veils a lot more, and my checklist, my kind of the trigger checklist that I often use for games.
Oh, yeah.
Because even though you're playing evil, as a player and as a dungeon master, I still have real issues with torture, and I still have actual real issues with harm to children. So setting those boundaries about, yes, we're evil, but there's still stuff that we're going to do off camera, or there's stuff that we're not going to touch anyway. So even though we're role-playing evil, people still don't particularly like role-playing sexual violence, for example. So there's still going to be some lines. So as long as you've got those lines in place, you've got the group still going for a goal. The backstabbing and the kicking of the goblin is still pretty damn fun. It's good. It's good to let it loose. It's kind of fun. Carl,
have you ever played an evil game, Carl?
Well, what's interesting is how you guys talked about it. I have not played a true evil game because I've played games like you guys were talking about. Because a true evil game, there is no goal other than the mayhem, and they're going to be infighting and stabbing each other back to become ahead. Eric, you mentioned there's this one person keeping him in line. Well, now they're no longer black and white. They have a nuance to them because they're all trying to share the same goal, and that's why they're together. Goblin hordes, they're not backstabbing each other because they have a common goal, and that's where they're going for. So there's a lot of people who've talked about evil games over. If you're truly playing an evil game, it will descend into nothing because there's nothing off the table. Between
evil,
and I will say,
law, order. I mean, there's lawful evil, right? I mean, so they make a distinction of it's not always chaos necessarily. I mean, and evil is subjective, right? Too, but obviously, if you're going around murdering people, if that's your thing, or you're trying to take over a country and kill off and slave or whatever, like there's certainly evil things that we can agree on as a culture. But I get your point, Carl.
We did attempt it as kids. Like, I think I was about 12, and me and our friends, let's play evil guys. It gets boring pretty quick. If all you're doing is chaos and killing everything in sight. It's actually the novelty wears off pretty fast.
And that's why people don't. I think that's why, like Eric, you said, it's a great setting and it's enjoyable to do. Just the generic, I'm playing an evil character. It doesn't last long because it's not fulfilling. Right. I mean,
well, again, remember, I think the trick was with as a player. Now, let's just touch on this before you go. When you're playing evil, when you're in acting, right, you're playing an evil person. They don't think of themselves as evil. Like I think the problem with evilness and selfishness and all of this comes down to is one-dimensional characters. Is that people just turn it down to one trait, and that's what they play off of, and there's no history behind it. It's like you can be a kleptomaniac. Why is this character a kleptomaniac? And then I think that's maybe. To go back to playing as a player like this is have your flaw, but have a reason for your flaw. Because once you build that out as why you have that flaw, then you will play it more organically. Then you will be able to react to people more appropriately. So again, evil is subjective, but people who are, they don't ever consider themselves as evil. They consider themselves maybe the hero, and other people are evil, or it's a means to an end because of some other certain reason. So it's, when you condense evil down to that one dimension, then of course, it goes to chaos, but you can have multi-dimensions being evil.
And I should say, and Carl touched on this game also, there are games out there that are fantastic at doing this. Vampire the Masquerade is the big one. Yeah. But there's Demon the Fallen, there's Wraith the Oblivion, where a lot of the content within that game is evil. If you can play a Sabbat vampire, which are all about chaos and destruction, and they have no humanity at all. They look at the world through a very different lens of right and wrong.
Yeah.
It's about loyalty to the sect, not at all about the humanity of being nice to other people. But in those games, again, lots of consent boundaries that you have to play with. But they're also kind of pretty bleak places to play in as well. I issue a word of caution too. Being role playing that stuff for too long, it messes with your mind after a while.
Yeah.
That is not my jam, vampire. Okay. All right. Well, thank you, Eric. That's a great discussion. I think I personally actually learned a few things that I did not know, or I hadn't thought about. So I appreciate what you guys offered up. Hopefully, everyone tuning in enjoyed as well and learned something. Remember to drop by masteringtherepg.com, see the projects we're working on, learn about everybody, and if you have questions, comments, want to have us talk about something, Game Master at masteringtherepg.com. If you like the show, please subscribe. We're on Apple, Google, and Spotify. So any catcher your choice. And of course, as all podcasters do, we beg you to give us a high review. And hopefully, if there's some things you'd like us to change or you got some ideas, hey, send us an email and we'll see where we go with that. We're new to this. We're only a few episodes in, really, and we got a long way to go. So thank you, everybody, again. Thank you, Eric and James. We'll say goodnight to you guys.
Happy gaming.
Good night to you guys.